don't know about you, but the past 2 weeks have been really intense. I'm sure there's been many uncomfortable, frustrating, angry, tearful conversations all across this country. I'm supposed to talk to you about immigration. I think that's what the program said. But I'm actually not. I'm here to talk about Define America, which is more than about immigration. We, Define American, we are a media, culture, and education organization that seeks to elevate the conversation around race, immigration, and citizenship in a changing America. That's what we do. And tonight, I am going to try, as much as I can in 45 minutes, to connect the dots. When I say media, by the way, what I mean is the me in media. There's a me in media. That's what social media is all about. That's what storytelling in the age of technology and diversity, people telling their own stories, people coming out as LGBT, as undocumented, as somebody who was sexually assaulted, all of those things. People coming out to let people in. When I say culture, I mean culture for us is politics. Culture is politics. You cannot change the politics of an issue like immigration unless you change the culture in which people talk about immigration. So long as they think we're a bunch of criminals and illegals taken away from this country, so long as they think this issue is nothing but about the U.S.-Mexico border and the illegal and the border in their minds, we're not going to get anywhere. Can you imagine where the LGBT rights movement would be without Ellen DeGeneres on the cover of Time, without Will and Grace, without Modern Family? Before LGBT rights shifted, the culture had to shift. And that's the same path we're trying to follow. And the third important thing that we do at Define American is education. And to me, to us, education is freedom. Among the reasons I'm here tonight is actually to thank all the educators and teachers in this room tonight for doing what you do, for liberating students, for liberating our hearts and our minds. I know that for me, if it wasn't for my teachers and my principal and my superintendent at Mountain View High School, I don't know what I would have done. They didn't need pieces of papers. They didn't need to look to laws and statutes to treat me as one of their students, as one of their kids. Because I was one of their kids. And so there's all these other countless undocumented middle school, high school, elementary, and college students all across this country. So when I was in high school, I was kind of precocious. I edited my high school newspaper, and I think one of the bigger stories I did when I was a senior was a story about why my school was so segregated. I was wondering why the Asian and the white kids hung out in one place, and then the Latino kids in another place, and why are the kids in front of the cafeteria? Black kids in front of the cafeteria. So then my principal, Pat Hyland, who loves this conference, by the way, she's really excited that I'm here. She's like my second mom. So I asked her, why are we segregating like this? Then she gave me this book entitled, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together? Published in 1997 by Beverly Daniel Tatum. He's now president of Spelman College.
Yes.
I read this when I was a senior, and I remember it felt like being hit by something else. And among the many virtues of this book was introducing me to a man I had never heard of before, whose name was James Baldwin. And the quote to me that really inspired me, and it inspired the trailer for the film that you just saw, that aired on CNN, is this. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Nothing can be changed until it is faced. I really don't know what I would have done without James Baldwin. After meeting him when I was a high school senior and watching all this archival footage of him at the library, there wasn't really much Google yet. This was in 2000. And I remember one of the interviews that really got me was this particular one with a television journalist named Kenneth Clark. This was filmed in 1963.
do you see deep in the recesses of your own mind as the future of our nation? And I ask that question in that way because I think that the future of the Negro and the future of the nation are linked.
They're insoluble.
Now, what do you see? Are you essentially optimistic or pessimistic? And I really don't want to put words in your mouth because what I really want to find out is what you really believe.
Well, I'm glad and sorry you asked me that question. I'll do my best to answer it. I can't be a pessimist because I'm alive. To be a pessimist means that you have agreed that human life is an epidemic now. So I'm supposed to be an optimist. I'm supposed to believe that we can survive, that everyone must survive. But the Negro in this country, the future of the Negro in this country is precisely as bright or as dark as the future of the country. It is entirely up to the American people and our representatives. It is entirely up to the American people whether or not they're going to face and deal with and embrace this stranger whom they've been on so long. What white people have to do is try to find out in their own hearts why it was necessary to have a Negro in the first place. Because I'm not a Negro. I'm a man. But if you think I'm a Negro, it means you need it. The question you've got to ask yourself, the white population of this country has got to ask itself, North and South, because it's one country, and for a Negro, there is no difference in North and South. It's just a difference in the way they castrate you. But that's the fact of castration is the American fact. If I'm not to live here, and you invented it, you the white people invented it, then you've got to find out why. Well, and the future of the country depends on that, whether or not I was able to ask that question.
I watched this video 15 years ago. Just imagine, I look like this, I'm Asian, my name is Jose Antonio Vargas. You get any more Latino than that? I was gay. I am gay. And at that time I already knew that I was quote unquote illegal. I was the kind of kid that would clam up whenever somebody used the word faggot or illegal. So hearing this man, who was black and gay at a time in which America was dealing or trying to deal with the black part and didn't know what to do with the gay part, and then him saying, wait a second, what you decide to call me says a lot more about you than it can possibly ever say about me. Was for me an incredibly liberating thing. Around that same time that I saw this video, during my first period U.S. history class, my history teacher, Mr. Farrell, showed us the Harvey Milk documentary. And at the end of the class, during the Q&A part, I raised my hand and told the whole class, I'm gay. Because I couldn't be in the closet about two things at once. I had to be out of one. Thankfully, I was in San Francisco, and it was easier to come out of the gay workforce. And I have to tell you, I'm not sure what I would have done if I hadn't been influenced by what Baldwin did. I'm not sure what I would have done if my high school principal wasn't the one that found a scholarship to get me to college. There was no DREAM Act. After 9/11 hit, my superintendent, Rich Fisher, said, okay, we gotta get this fixed. So for the first time, I meet with a lawyer. I come from a lower middle class family. My grandmother was a food server, my grandfather was a security guard. Both of them naturalized American citizens, both of whom didn't believe in lawyers, didn't know lawyers. They thought I would marry a woman, get a green card, and do it that way. And I said, no, I'm gay, I'm not doing that. So Rich Fisher, my superintendent, took me to downtown San Francisco. We met with a lawyer. This was a month after 9/11. And the lawyer said, this is really bad. The only solution is for Jose to go back to the Philippines, accept a 10-year bar, to try to come back. We were walking down Montgomery Street in downtown San Francisco, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm doing. Rich Fisher turned around and said, no, you're already here. Right. Keep going. This is Pat Hyland and Rich Fisher. I don't know what I would have done without them all these years. And about 12 years later, against the advice of 29 lawyers, immigration lawyers, I decided that after lying in government forms and checking boxes I wasn't supposed to check, and getting a driver's license I wasn't supposed to get, and lying to my friends and my employers and to myself, that I was done. The second coming out was about to happen. By the way, I'm totally done coming out. And I did this. That's not the most horrible photo you've ever seen. So against the advice of lawyers, I wrote a 4,000-word essay admitting to everything. And here's the interesting thing. I wasn't the only person that came out. I outed my principal. I outed my superintendent with her permission. I outed my editor at the Washington Post, who the moment I told him I was undocumented, I thought he was going to report me to HR. You know what he said? It makes so much more sense now. Don't tell anybody else. Keep going. Can you imagine how many other people do that every day? Every day. Journalism, mechanic, I don't know, every other field. And we never hear their stories. So I outed all these people. And for me, the goal was, how do we let you guys know who we are? The fact that we pay billions of dollars in taxes. The fact that in the past 10 years, according to the Social Security Administration, undocumented workers like us contributed $100 billion in the Social Security Fund. This is according to the Social Security people. By the way, do you hear this in the news?
No.
It's not part of the master narrative, right? We just take and take and take. The other thing that you don't hear in the news is that 17 million people in America live in what's called the mixed status family. So I'm Filipino, we're like the Italians of Asia. Huge families. So I have 25, 28 relatives, uncles, nieces, grandmothers, grandfathers, cousins, nephews. I'm the only one of 25 who's undocumented. There are 17 million people who live in households like that. So when you deport somebody like me, what do you think my grandmother or my aunt, my uncle, or my cousins, or my nephews and my nieces are going to think? That's another figure that we don't hear about. And this to me is a real tragedy. In 2006, it was congressionally mandated that every day, as we're sitting here today, every day across America, at least 34,000 people must be in detention cells. Arrested for either driving, they get picked up, for actually working, they get raped. If you're in Arpaio, if you're in Arizona, Arpaio, the Bull Connor of the 21st century. If you're in Arizona, they arrest you for trying to work. 34,000 people, it's a bed quota, congressionally mandated. By the way, do you know that you're paying for this? And who do you think is benefiting? The for-profit prison industrial complex that lock up not only immigrants, we all know, but also African American and disproportionately around the country. So these are the facts that you don't really hear much, even on MSNBC. I've gone on Bill O'Reilly 4 or 5 times. I can't get these facts out. This is not part of the narrative. So this is what I've been doing for the past 2 years doing this work. And to be perfectly honest, I feel a certain kind of guilt. When I decided to do this, I was ready to be deported. I was ready for somebody to show up. I wasn't ready to become this walking, uncomfortable conversation that no one wants to really talk about. And what's interesting is, about 8 months into it, I decided that I was going to call the government myself. I called the editor of Time magazine and I said, hey, I want to write a story about why they haven't deported me. And he was like, okay. If you're going to do this, you're going to do it all the way. So I called Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It used to be called INS, it's now ICE. I called them up, I'm like, hi, I'm Jose Vargas. I haven't heard from you. It's in the film, actually. I haven't heard from you. Are you going to deport me? Why? Why not? The woman on the line was like, off the record, what are you doing? I'm not going off the record. What are you doing? And then she said, she put me on hold. And she came back on the phone after 30 seconds, and I said, I'm on deadline. I'm sorry for time. And then she said, and it was kind of funny, but it's not. And then she said, no comment. You know, we're driving on the same freeway, we go to the same church, we shop at the same Starbucks, we go to the same Walmart. You know you need us. No comment. So long as somebody's babysitting your kid or mowing your lawn or serving you drinks, you food, you're cool.
Yes.
Well, no comment is not acceptable anymore. So then I ended up writing a story, and then Time people were like, okay, we're going to put you on the cover. I'm like, no, I already did that. Why don't we put 35 other people on the cover? And I have to say that this is probably the proudest moment of my journalistic career. 36 undocumented people from 15 different countries. Why is it that we never talk about undocumented white people from Germany?
Yes.
I'd be thinking about that.
Why is it that we support for undocumented Caribbeans and Africans? They're not even talking. What is this border security thing really about? Can we really divorce race and class from this conversation? No. And the reality is, when I quote-unquote outed myself, when I risked my life so I could free myself from it, you know, I started thinking about history. History, I'm kind of a big Howard Sanders history buff.
Yes.
And thinking about Susan B. Anthony and the women's rights movement. Thinking about a man named Franklin Kameny. This was pre-Stonewall. The godfather of the gay civil rights movement was a man named Franklin Kameny, who got discharged from the army in the 1950s in Washington, D.C. for being homosexual, who in a three-piece suit would get in front of the White House, put up a sign that said, "Gay is good. First-class citizenship for homosexuals." This is in 1955. You know, I thought about, as somebody who majored in political science and African American studies at San Francisco State, thinking about the early immigrants, before Ellis Island. If you think about Irish and the Germans, the Italians and the Polish and the Latvians, what did they have in common when they got to America? Not much. You know what the second word they learned the moment they landed here? I can't say it. The N-word. Because the thing that actually connected all these immigrants from Europe was the fact that they weren't black. As early, this is the pre-Ellis Island days, they had already decided that there was white and there was black. And if you think of slavery as the original sin, which of course it is, then the original lie is black or white. It's funny, you know, growing up in the Philippines, we learned to speak English by listening to Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson songs. I didn't know they were black until I got here. Because we called them America. We didn't call them black. And then I'm like, but wait, but Michael Jackson is light skinned, but then he has a song called It Doesn't Matter If You're Black or White, but then why did it change? I don't know. And then where does somebody, it's been fascinating to me, and I'm sure to you, watching Ferguson and watching what's happening with the news, and looking at this whole issue from a prism of black or white, and white America and black America, dividing us from each other. What about the Asian people? I don't know, the fastest growing racial group. What about the Latinos, the largest minority group? What about all those people who are like, you know, having sex and intermarrying and having these neat kids, like, I don't know, Barack Obama? What about them? Where do they fit in this equation, right? When I outed myself as undocumented and gay and whatever the hell I am, I not only wanted to disrupt what people think of immigration, but I wanted to question the very definition of what constitutes America. The difference between you and I is I don't have pieces of papers. That's what being undocumented means. Your life is subjected to pieces of papers. I recently gave a lecture in Connecticut, and I was talking about how to be undocumented means not having papers. After the lecture, this African-American woman came up, and she said, I've been sitting here thinking about papers, and thinking about my great-great-great-grandmother, who came here as a slave, who was given a piece of paper, a bill of sale, because she was property. And then she looked at me and she said, can you connect those two things? I find it really, really interesting that whenever we talk about immigration in America, we focus so much on Mexico, Never mind, by the way, that Mexico used to own parts of the United States.
Yes.
We talk so much about this border, never mind the Atlantic Ocean was the original border, that we forget to ask the really hard questions, which is, why do people move? What does U.S. foreign policy and U.S. trade agreements have to do with migration patterns? I don't know, NAFTA. I was in North Carolina a few months ago, and I did a Tea Party event, because you have to push me on the quiet. And so this man, when I said that there's 4 million Filipinos in America, 4 million Filipinos in America, we're the 3rd largest immigrant group, Mexicans, Chinese, Filipinos. This man said to me, why are there so many of you here? And not in the way. And it was late at night, and all I could really say was, you know, sir, we are here because you were there. That's what I did. When the Philippines was like Puerto Rico, a territory of this country, right? Why is it that when we talk about these issues, we don't contextualize it as such? I mean, I'm perfectly aware of why I'm here and how I got here. I got here because my grandfather and all of his divine wisdom was making $7 an hour as a security guard and decided that he couldn't get me here legally, so therefore he was going to save $4,500 to buy a fake green card. I got here for $4,500. I know what the price of that was, literally and figuratively. And as I traveled around the country, 350 events in the past 3 years, visiting maybe 190 college campuses, and as many events and talked to as many Republicans and conservatives as possible, including Bill O'Reilly, the question we have to ask people is, how did you get here? Do you know how? Do you value it? What are you going to do with it? 2 weeks ago, President Obama did something that he really needed to do, which is an executive action. Right? Now, this executive action only impacts 5 million people, so it's not enough. It did not go far enough, but clearly for the Republicans in Congress, it went too far, because it is now Emperor Obama. Never mind that 6 presidents, Republican and Democrat, have issued 11 executive orders in the past 69 years. Never mind all that. So, the moment, the night that the president gave his speech on TV, I was sitting in a green room on Fox News in D.C., preparing to go mano a mano with Mr. Bill O'Reilly. And you're probably wondering why I'm doing that. I'm doing that because Bill O'Reilly is the most watched cable host prime time. By far. By far. And I'm sitting in the green room, and the president just announced what was happening, and I'm realizing as I'm listening to the president that I now have some sort of temporary papers, and more than that, I'm going to be able to see my mom. This is kind of crazy. So I'm sitting in the green room, and Laura Ingraham was getting her makeup done in the Daily. And I called my mom. I called my mom and I said, hey, you know, I think by April, I can be there. It's been 21 years this past August. I can be there by April. You know, we'll figure this out. There'll be no cameras, just you and me. We'll figure this out. And then I hear Laura Ingraham says, talking about executive action, she says, why can't we take care of our own people first? That's all I can hear say. And so that was what's in my head when I went live on Bill O'Reilly. And Bill O'Reilly says to me, looked me in the monitor and said to me, Jose, you're not entitled to be here, and you don't deserve to be here. And you know, my eyebrows are probably like doing what they were. And I just didn't have the presence of mind, because in my head, all I could think about was, what do I say to my mom first? I was already trying to figure out, like, what do I say? How do you summarize 21 years? I don't know. How do you tell someone you love them, you know, after 20? I don't know. So I didn't know how to respond. Thankfully, the following night, Chris Hayes had me on the show. And finally, I had a chance to actually, you know, say what I wanted to say, which is to ask Mr. Bill O'Reilly, who's of Irish descent, does he deserve to be here? What has he done to be here? You know, you hear a lot about earned citizenship, about the fact that people like us should earn being here. My question to my fellow Americans is, what have you done to earn it? Is it like a lottery? Right? born here, so therefore you're an American, poof, you're an American. I actually think I didn't understand who I was and what my fight was. I don't think you can fully understand American history without understanding the people who suffer from it. Native Americans, African Americans, all the injustices, all these years that have been done, passed along. I actually think undocumented people in this country show Americans what it is to be American. Because it's a fight. While people are calling us illegal criminals. Because we have to insist on who we are. Because we have to show people that it is worth it to be here. And I hope and I pray that we're looking at some very dangerous next few weeks and months when the Republican Congress and the House and the Senate tries to defund and turn this around. And I hope that you will join us, and I hope that you become allies for us. There's another thing I have to talk about. The film that I just showed you, the trailer, we've been traveling with it. We developed a high school curriculum that's been developed with the Southern Poverty Law Center and the National Council for Social Studies, last social studies teachers. Yay! So if you want to pilot the curriculum, please go to defineamerican.com and you'll see some information there. We've been showing the films in high school campuses. Yesterday, I was at Berkeley, not too far from where I live. I went to Berkeley High School. I had the privilege of speaking to about 300 high school students, and I had a lot of intense conversations, and this is definitely the most intense. It was in a theater. They had just seen documented the film, and the film chronicles my separation from my mother, what that looks like. I couldn't go to the Philippines, but I sent a film crew to film it. That's what the film's about. So after they watched the film, we did a Q&A, and the first person to get up on my left was this young black man wearing a baseball cap, kind of shy, And then he says, how do you keep going and keep fighting, knowing that many people don't want you here? And I'm sorry, but as I'm sure like you are, you can't get your mind off Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, and I'm listening to this young man say this. And I started realizing that he wasn't really asking me that question, he was really talking about himself. So I turned the question around to him and I said, given what happened and what is happening, as a young black man in this country, how do you feel? Why are you fighting? And this man says, I don't know. I feel like we're unwanted animals. Feel like we're unwanted animals. And thankfully, it was, it kind of just hung in the air. Then a few minutes later, another man gets up and says, hi, I'm half Egyptian, half American. My dad got deported when I was 3, back to Egypt. This was right after 9/11, and the anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-Egyptian tenor was hitting Peter Mitch, and his dad got deported. So then he said this in front of everybody. And they looked at me and he said, can you help me find my dad? We'll try. Then a few minutes after that, there was this young blonde kid sitting on the right. And he said that when people say people of color, they're not talking about me, he said. But I'm not white. He said, the color of my skin is actually pink. And black people aren't black people, they're actually brown. And I love the kids because they listen, they're listening. And then he said, and this really killed me, and then he said, whenever people say people of color, I feel invisible. And then I looked at him, I'm so glad he said it, and I'm really proud that his classmates, most of whom were Latinos, Asians, and blacks. This is the Bay Area. The Bay Area was the first majority region in America, right? But I said to the man, his name is Quinn, I said to this blind man, I said to him, wait a second though. I hear you, I feel you when you say that you feel invisible, that whenever we talk about diversity, we don't include you. I see that. But why is it that when I turn to television, why is it when I watch movies? Why is it when I buy Vanity Fair and Us Weekly? Yes. Why is it all I see are white people? As a young gay Asian man, I always wanted to be desirable was to be white. Because, that's what the media told me. It wasn't until, I got all James Baldwin up that I had to realize the own corruption that I was going through. And I had to liberate myself from what we all call to be the master narrative. But here's the challenge now. What is the master narrative when we are in a moment in America when people feel like they're the other? I've gone to places in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama, and you talk to working class white people. All you know is Barack and Michelle, Beyonce and Jay-Z, Jennifer Lopez, Jeremy Lin, and all these Asian kids have taken over their country. And they say to me that they feel left out. This is precisely why, by the way, the next film project that I'm working on is on what it means to be young and white in post-Obama America. I'm going to start filming a documentary starting next month for MTV, going to college campuses and high school campuses, asking white Americans, young white Americans, what's white? We always get asked where we're from. Well, where are you from? White is not a country. Where are you from? And until you know where you're from, how can you ask me where I'm from? Right? So this got announced a couple weeks ago. Everybody kind of went a little crazy because they were like, why do you think about white? All I can tell you is more than ever before, we call it, maybe amongst this group, white privilege. All I can tell you is when I travel around the country talking to working class, lower class white people, they don't think they're privileged at all. And unless we connect with them, unless we see the invisibility that they feel to be part of us, we are not going to get in. All we're going to have are acronyms. All we're going to do is go in a little corner and say that they're hateful, that they hate us. I spent a month once covering Sarah Palin in Ohio. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. The greatest gift that journalism ever gave me was empathy. There isn't anybody that I can sit down with, right, and try to hear their story. I am less interested in what people call me because I get really creative hate emails. I'm more interested in why do you think and feel what you think and what you feel. And this is a marriage, you and I. We have to figure it out. So after this really incredibly intense high school session, I was like ready to go. Then this young woman comes running, Latina, long hair, she's wearing this pink shirt, she's really cute. She starts crying, and she's like, I have something really personal to tell you. And I made a really bad assumption. I'm like, oh, she's going to tell me she's undocumented. I was already making an assumption in my head, okay, how do I get her scholarship? Because usually it was not She looks up, and then she says, you're the second person I'm telling this to. I'm gay. And she starts crying. She starts crying because she said she loves her father very much. Papa, she calls him. He's really homophobic. And she's afraid that if she says something to him or to his mother, that she's not the little princess anymore in her eyes. She told a friend, and then she told me, and she was asking me, who do I tell now? You know what I tell her? I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. That's it. So, that is your job. That is your blessing. Graham Greene is one of my favorite writers, and he said once that there is a moment in every childhood when a door opens and lets the future in. If it weren't for my teachers, who I outed myself as gay to, who found out that I was undocumented, who saw me fully as a person, capable of many things, doors were then completely shut. So thank you to all of you in this room who opened many, many doors. And I hope and I pray that we find a way to actually connect. Not just to communicate, because actually we over-communicate. But to connect. It's really a great privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you. She loves this conference. I'm going to record the video. Can you just say thank you, Pat? So 1, 2, 3, say thank you, Pat. Okay, wait. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Pat!
Questions. Let's get uncomfortable. Ask as many uncomfortable questions as you want. Over there. There's 2 mics.
Hello.
Can you give us your name?
Yeah, my name is Yaneli de la Rosa. I'm from California.
Oh, great.
My father was undocumented when he first came into this country. Thank you so much for all that you've done. As an educator, I was just wondering, because, as you said, being undocumented is something you can have to oust yourself as. You have to make yourself vulnerable. What I'm wondering is, as an educator, how do I reach out to my students who might be undocumented, who might not want to tell me, or might be fearful of making themselves ousted?
There are a few groups. The number one group that I would recommend is called Educators for Fair Consideration. They're actually based in California. Are you familiar with them? Educators for Fair Consideration. And they've developed a curriculum that you actually can give to college counselors. Because I've heard horror stories, by the way, that once a kid tells the college counselor that they're undocumented, the college counselor takes the scholarship form away and says, you can't go to college. Because we just don't have, there isn't a standardized way that people are talking about this in the classrooms. I find it, somewhere up there, Harvey and James Baldwin are probably all like smiling because the intersection between immigrant rights and LGBT rights is so rich. In the same way that gay-straight alliances revolutionize how we talk about, LGBT people in high schools, I think something like that has to happen. In Divine American, we're actually starting Divine American college chapters, and we're going to the most conservative colleges across the country. Our first chapter is going to be at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. Last year, they decided the College Republicans decided to have a game called Catch an Illegal Immigrant.
Oh my God.
So I decided that I was going to fly there and talk to them myself. It was really beautiful because we talked to them, and then we invited all the undocumented Texas Tech students in one room and had them talk to each other. That's the kind of stuff that we're hoping to foster more. Educators for Fair Consideration. If you Google that, you'll see it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is William, and in February I'm going to see my mom after 9 years. So I want you to build a little bit more on something that you said, which has been a struggle my entire life, when you said about media. And the fact that I never found myself in the media, but I know that we, the people of color who are here, we're the ones that support the market out there. And until we don't take a stand, it's never going to change. Hollywood, the TV, the newspapers, if I feel that I've been contributing to negate the possibility of seeing my reflection over there too.
It's a great question. And this is the context, right? Next year is the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. Did that piece of legislation guarantee voting rights? No. Here we are 50 years after the Civil Rights Act, and what's happening? Right? Pieces of legislation don't necessarily mean we become welcome. or that the world become more and more fair and more just. That's why culture for us is a really big strategy. 6 months ago, Divine American started a partnership with UCLA Global Social Media Impact Study. And about once a month, we meet with screenwriters, producers, and directors and figure out how we can integrate immigrants and storylines of immigrants into Law and Order, all these like shows. That's a really important way for us to make ourselves and our stories known outside of the political sphere. We can't play the political game. We can't over-politicize this thing any more than it already is, right? So for us, that's a really important strategy. And I have to tell you this, as a person called as a filmmaker, it's bad. Far too often, our stories are told, but we're not telling our stories. Somebody else is telling it for us. That's why I felt really, really compelled to produce and direct my own film. Actually, when I told people that I'm directing my own documentary about my life, they're like, you can't do that. How can you trust yourself? How do Woody Allen trust himself? Hasn't Woody Allen been making the same film for the last 3 years? I'm going to say one thing about this. As somebody who's a news journalist, I spent 10 years of my life working for magazines and newspapers, usually the only person of color in the room. I find it really, really interesting that when you watch television, right, when a gay person, a person of color, or a woman says it, on MSNBC or Fox, it's called having an agenda, right, and being biased. When a white man says it, it's called an analysis. Now, what is that about? And I actually think this is why the media, to me, is a really, really crucial part. And our lives, you're absolutely right, our lives and our stories are not reflected. So how do we work with our white allies to figure out how we can work together and do this? That's really, really important. So thank you for that question. Who else?
My name is Marty, and this may seem trivial, but I've been watching you and learning more about you lately.
I'm sorry about that. I'm totally done talking about myself. We're talking about white people soon.
The thing that keeps me curious is, was there ever a point where you had to just get in a car, you couldn't fly, you couldn't travel? I mean, it's very mundane, but...
I got arrested in Texas in July. When the border crisis was happening, I wanted to film in the refugee shelters where these kids were being welcomed, right? I don't know about you, but this past summer, whenever NBC, ABC, and the New York Times kept calling these kids illegal, that's how far we've fallen in this country, that we were calling children illegal. So I went down to Texas. How many of you live in southern Texas in the border? Okay, I've never been down there. I didn't know that it was a military zone.
Right.
I didn't know that if you live in the 60-mile radius, right, in the Texas-Mexico border, right, if you're undocumented, you're stuck. So I flew in thinking I could fly out. Tomorrow, when I fly out of here, the only piece of paper I have is a Filipino passport. I'm going to show it to the TSA person. They're going to look at it. They're going to see it's a passport. They're going to be okay. In Texas, the Border Patrol guy sits next to the TSA guy. So the moment I show my passport, the Border Patrol guy was like, hey, do you have any papers? No. Are you here illegally? I'm not lying. Yes. He handcuffs me and puts me in the irony. I ended up being in the exact same cell as the kids. I just want you to imagine 9, 10, 11-year-old, mostly boys, right, in a prison cell. I don't speak Spanish. All I know is donde está la biblioteca. That's all I know. It's really weird. The guards come to the room and they're like, say Vargas. And the kids are like, looking at me and I'm like, well, and then I was in the cell for 8 hours. By the 4th hour, I think the Border Patrol people came to this thing and said, you're all over Google. They realized that they had arrested somebody that maybe they should not have arrested. And then they got me out. They basically said that the government decided to release me. And again, the guilt, the privilege, right? 1,000 people get deported every day, and because I happen to be this whatever person, they keep trying to let me go. I was ready to be arrested and deported from day one. What I was not prepared for was this kind of inaction and silence, right? We're in Indiana. do you all know that Indiana is one of the 17 states that just sued President Obama yesterday because of executive action? So what do you want to do with us? What do you want to do with us? So, one last thing about these kids. This is where race is really important. I'm so sorry. If these kids were from Canada, if these were white kids, if Tamir Rice were white, I'm sorry, we would not have allowed this to happen.
Yes.
We would not allow it. They're marching in the streets. They're doing like a 24-hour TV-thon of the crisis and violence in America. But this is why it's really imperative that we connect these dots and that we work together more than ever. So, thank you.
My name is Scott Gonzalez, and I grew up on the border, and both of my parents were educators for migrant-educated kids, and most of them were Mexican-American, and thank you for enlightening this crowd about that. The question I have is that there's always this narrative of what are you doing here and why don't you follow the process? We've had teachers who have been international teachers who've wanted to get their citizenship, and it takes them forever. One little mistake, we send them back to Japan or Europe or wherever they're from for 3 months, and they've been serving children who are going to be leaders in this country. So how do I respond when somebody says, well, follow the process? Where do I find out what that process is? Because when my grandparents came from Mexico, they had to bribe the guards at the border with Indian head nickels, and that's how they got in. So what is it now? What's the game now?
Before I did this work, I had assumed that there was a big gap between the reality and the perception, right? I would not have predicted that the gap was actually the Pacific Ocean. It's oceanic. What people don't know about the facts, like for example, Social Security. Do you ever hear that figure being reported anywhere? The fact that people don't even know.
I've said that for a long time to a lot of people about taxation and all that kind of stuff.
And by the way, we don't get it back.
It's not documented.
We don't get it back. By the way, I have paid, I think, $120,000 to Social Security using a fake doctor Social Security card, and I don't get that back, which is fine. Not really. It's not like any of us are going to get it back. But to your point, isn't it astounding, given how much the media reports on this issue, how much hate, how much talk is, the American public doesn't know that there is no line, there's no process. People, the three things people ask me all the time are, what do you mean you're not Mexican? Usually the first thing. The second thing, why haven't they deported you? I don't know. The thing that is my favorite is, why don't you make yourself legal? I'm a masochist. This is so much more fun. And then when I explain to them that it doesn't mean I just go to Kinko's and fill out a form and send it somewhere and wait. It doesn't work like that. That's why we need reform, because there's no process. And yet, whenever you hear a politician says people like me should wait in the back of the line, how many times do you hear a journalist say, Governor Romney, what's the line? They don't do that. It's astounding to me, and this is a really big key deal I'm about to say right now. I just recently read a book called The Race Beat, which is what happened when white journalists from the North went to the South and started calling it what it was, which is the civil rights movement, right? The problem in our country right now is, back in the 50s, 60s, we had 3 television channels. No matter how bigoted you are, the information is all around you. Now, we all live in our own bubble. I spent a month with Sarah Palin, as I said, in Ohio, listening to people tell me, convinced that Barack Obama is Muslim. I said, there's something wrong with being Muslim. And they all go on Google, they read what they read, and they look at me, and they're like, see, he's Muslim. And I'm like, it's not a reputable source. Well, what's a reputable source? The New York Times. No, they're liberal. Okay? I mean, I have to tell you, by the way, all the travels that I've been doing in the past 3 years, I am most worried we are not on the same page at all. And the media creates more tension and never wants to see any clarity. So, white kid who feels that whenever we talk about diversity, he's invisible, and the Egyptian man, young man, who says that my dad got deported. It's all the same in America. How do we connect them? It's a really big challenge. And we're only one group, but we're trying as much as we can.
Thank you for comforting me like cold porridge.
I have one last question left, I think. 40 seconds. Yes, somebody.
Well, I think my name is Irene Reed, and my question actually is a follow-on to what you were just saying. I really admire the fact that you go and talk to people who don't agree with you. Have you had a breakthrough moment with someone, like a poor white person, someone who, read something that they had a moment where they saw? Because I think that's one thing that we're all trying to do. We have to help people see, but we also have to see. And so I'm wondering how you ever.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was going to play a clip from the film that just encapsulates this. I was in Alabama, in Birmingham, and this drunken dude just starts kind of interrupting my interview. And then he was like, "You got papers?" Oh, no. Well, get your ass home then. So we had this really great exchange on camera. And to me, and again, this gets back to what I said about the greatest gift journalism giving me is empathy. I was trained to listen. That's what I have to do. No matter whatever name you call me, whatever ignorant thing you say, my training is you sit there and you figure out where that person's coming from. So what I find really helpful is to just give people the space to talk. And not, I guess this also comes from the fact that when I was a kid, I hated being judged. So I tried really hard. The easiest thing is to call somebody sexist, racist, and homophobic. That's the easiest thing to do. The easiest thing is to hate somebody, especially if you don't even know them. So that's why for me, especially when we do Tea Party Republican events, it's really important that I come with as much humility as I can, but at the same time, with as much facts as I can. Right? It's really, really important. And seeking connection. Now, I'm about to do a debate with Michelle Malkin in a few months. She's Filipina American. I think she may have forgotten. It's going to get really, really interesting. But again, the number one point to me is to connect. Since I cannot overstate how I pray to the altar of James Baldwin. And probably my favorite quote of his is this: "Our history is each other. That is our only God. Our history is each other. That is our only God." That informs my work. And that makes me feel that the brute, the battler, the bigot, he or she is also a part of me. And I need to learn what that is. So thank you again very, very much.
Thank you. You're talking about connecting, and by the way, if you decide to go the Kinko's route, let me know, because I got Photoshop skills and it would be my honor to give you some documents.
That's really funny. That's what my grandfather did. He took the notes and put a line over the card. Yeah, that's what he did.
Okay. So my question is about the far future.
Yeah.
If you could envision, when you envision the far future, when people are looking back to these uncivilized times of the early 21st century, where we had all these undocumented people that we exploited, etc. What does it look like? What do you think about global citizenship and the future of global migration and, something about that, whatever you think about that? Thank you.
That's a great question. So before I outed myself, I spent 5 weeks reporting on Mark Zuckerberg and interviewing him for the New Yorker. Since 2010. And Mark just started an organization called Internet.org. I don't know if you've heard of this. He's on the cover of Time this week. And his organization is about putting every human being on the internet. Which is great, as far as I'm concerned. said this to him personally, but I'm going to tell you publicly now. The question I would ask Mark is,
YouTube tomorrow.
look, I believe that a country has a right to defend and define its border and figure out who a citizen is and what that requirements are. I do believe that. I do believe that we can find a balance between what we consider to be the law, right? But if I don't need a passport or a green card to get on Facebook, YouTube, and Google, if the whole world is connected by technology in this flattening globalized world, why can't people move? Is there anything more human than moving? According to the United Nations, 230 million people are migrants around the world. Migrants. More than any other nation in this world. And you know what's really, really interesting? Most of them are people of color. And most of them are migrating to the very same countries that colonize and imperialize them. This is going to be a tough conversation. And I feel as if, for me, somebody asked me the other day, hey, aren't you a global citizen? Yes, we all are. But I'd love to be, a citizen of the country I call my home. So I think what I'm getting at with you is this idea of defining what citizenship means, right? For us to define American, if there's one thing when I talk to especially kids who know nothing about immigration, who thinks immigration is not about them, and then I remind them, I'm sorry, how are you eating your burger? Who got to that salad? What I remind them is, how many people here are American citizens? Can you raise your hand? Can you not take it for granted?
Never do.
Please, don't do that. Because more than ever, we need you to side not in front of us, but alongside us. And in the next few weeks and months, with immigration in particular, we need you to come out like we've come out. Power of allies, the need for empathy. So, thank you. Thank you.
Otra ronda de aplauso, por favor.